So coming up next, we have a special 1-hour panel discussion on the topic of conscious consumerism with Melissa Dusenberry, Nimreet Grewal, and moderated by Meineke. Thank you, Melissa, Nimreet, and Michelle for being here.
Thank you very much for having us. I am really looking forward to today. So hello and welcome to this panel where we're going to dive into conscious consumerism, what it means, why it matters, and what's next. I'm Michelle Meineke, and I'm delighted, like I say, to be moderating the session. Before we ask Melissa and Nimreet to introduce themselves and their fascinating backstories, I'll lay the foundations for today's talk. We'll start with what is conscious consumerism. In a nutshell, it comes down to consumers having sustainability at the front and center of their mind when they shop and when they consume. They want their purchase to have a positive impact across the spectrum, socially, environmentally, economically. And along with the rise of influential environmental agreements that we're all seeing in our news headlines, such as the Paris Agreement and the more recent rise of net zero, we've also had the impact of the pandemic. The pandemic triggered a surge in social awareness, and from that, there's been a much brighter spotlight on the environment and how the appetite of the world's 8 billion people affects the planet, which includes the 340 million people in the US. And in the US, consumer spending accounts for more than 14 trillion annually, which is 2/3 of the US's GDP. Those are very, very big numbers from McKinsey that were recently revealed. And an important subset of this spending, which directly relates to our conversation today, goes towards everyday consumer packaged goods, CPG. Now, these range from foods and beverages to cosmetics to cleaning products, items that all of us buy every day, every week. And items that all have a massive environmental footprint when we consume them in bulk. So clearly something has to change, and it is. In the US, and beyond. In the UK, for example, the value of ethical markets has grown by nearly 35% to 142 billion. This is the largest jump in the value of this market in 22 years. It's a good start, but there is still, as I think the panelists will agree, a long, long way to go. Let's move on to introductions. I'll share a one-liner, as you've heard quite a bit from me already. I've worked in sustainability and editorial for more than 15 years as an analyst, as a journalist, as a consultant, across the spectrum, from carbon pricing to water rights to ESG. And I'm looking now to see what Melissa and Nimreet have to say. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. Can you please share a brief introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. And I'm Melissa Dusenberry, founder of All the Brilliance, a fine jewelry company specializing in thoughtfully designed pieces made by women. Gemstone education is very much a part of All the Brilliance DNA. This not only includes why one gemstone is more valuable than another, but also advocating for responsible sourcing. As your fine jewelry guide, I help you select pieces that amplify your personal style and align with your values, be that supporting climate action or UN SDGs. Sometimes it even means rediscovering what is already in your jewelry box. So beyond acquiring new pieces, I help women reimagine what is not currently being worn and transforming it into something that will be loved and enjoyed again, just like this.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. Nimreet, over to you, please.
Thank you for having me, and welcome everyone. My name is Nimreet, and I'm a founder of Soneha. Soneha is a plant-based accessories brand that is working on making sustainable fashion living more affordable and available to everyone. We do this by encouraging consumers to contribute to a greener future by planting one tree per order. So I'm really glad to be here and looking forward to where the session goes.
And Nimreet and Melissa both have brilliant websites. Sorry, Melissa, for the use of the word, but they're fantastic websites. And of course, your LinkedIn, and anybody's welcome to follow and see more details about their fascinating careers on there as well. Let's dive in to really start seeing what impact conscious consumerism is having in terms of driving demand for sustainable products and influencing supply chains to become more friendly. And Melissa, I would ask, is there a real chicken egg situation going on here, in the sense that if people are offered such options, then there tends to be a greater uptake of them? Or is it people are asking for these options and therefore these supply chains and companies are coming to the fore to meet that demand? Where do you see that balance?
You know, I think it goes in both directions. You know, a lot of consumers do come to me seeking jewelry that aligns with their values. And I've discovered there's a lot of misinformation. While historically the jewelry industry was opaque, a lot of progress has actually been made there. But today, the pervasive issue is, and this is across all industries, is greenwashing. So an example of this is, say you're looking for an engagement ring and climate action is important to you. Lab-grown diamonds are not your best option. And that's not just because their eco claims are deceptive. Your best option is post-consumer recycled diamonds, because they've already incurred a cost in their carbon footprint, be it 400 or 400 years old. And we forget, since ancient times, jewelry has always been circular. Also worthy of note, when natural diamonds were discovered in Botswana, they radically transformed a nation in ways that I guess currently is a benefit to the nation, but it will continue to be a benefit in the future. And that is including people, wildlife, and the environment long after diamonds are mined out. And if I could just touch back on lab-grown diamonds, they're great in terms of economics, but their value continues to drop precipitously. And that's simply because they're a mass manufactured product that is flooding the market. But there are other affordable options. Another one is colored gemstones. I think it's something that people don't necessarily think of. An example is sapphire. And sapphire is great because it's durable and it could be worn in any kind of ring without too much worry that you might wear every day. And it can be any color of the rainbow except red. And also, when colored gemstones are responsibly sourced from artisanal miners, some of which are women, you can positively impact people and the planet. And of course, that aligns with your values.
It's really interesting what you were saying there as well about in labs, they're grown en masse. And so really the story is, there is no story, it's eradicated. And with something like jewelry, especially if there's a higher price point and there's more emotion attached to it, it is about the story, isn't it? It's about the emotion. It's about the character that you essentially assign to that item and to that stone. And so it's the flip side of communication, trying to communicate the ethical consumption, but at the same time that communication narrative is also key about building the character of the stone, and that you won't get that in the lab, but you will get that by repurposing. And so there's two parallels moving together there. That's very interesting. I'd love to loop back to that, Melissa. Thank you very much. Nimreet, how about you? What's your take on this chicken egg, and how conscious consumerism just drives demand for sustainable products?
So in the weekend fashion industry, I would say definitely have more the increased demand positive impact in terms of we've seen in recent years that even big brands at a more state and local level, you've seen a ban of fur materials, like it really encourages brands, I would say, to keep on innovating. You have to find the better next better sustainable practice you can do, and I would definitely credit our younger generation for that. They're very bold. They know, they want to see change, they want to see it now, and they're passionate, and they really want workers to be fairly paid, animals and our environment to be treated more fairly. And I would say definitely the pressure that comes from them has a positive impact. And as well as for Soneha, I would say that I started the company in November 2020 was like also during COVID. So I knew that I wanted to have that as a foundation when I started. but as more like a yearly basis, I'm always looking at my supply chain in, okay, what can I do better? So the current I started with leather, which is around 90% plant-based and 10% we use renewable sources. But now I've added testing coconut leather, which is 100% plant-based and it's fully biodegradable. So I'm always looking for, okay, how can I make this better for the customers as well as my own business, like what I would have liked. And recently I was reading this study that was also done by McKinsey that said that 67% of consumers said when they buy fashion items, it matters to them if the brand is transparent and what type of sustainable practices they have. So we have this high increase that's coming in, and I think collectively we're moving toward that. There always work to be done, but it's really exciting way, and I feel like there's a lot more hope than to be depressed about everything that you see that's happening. But I'm it's a really exciting time to be in it, and definitely has a positive impact on supply chains. And if you don't keep up, I just think businesses are going to be left behind with the increased
Absolutely.
demands we
The
have.
speed of change is so great. And your comments there made me think of cosmetics. And when we started looking at in a much more proactive way when we're buying our cosmetics, are these animal cruelty free? And and there was a lot of studies out there that went through all those cosmetic companies and went down their supply chains. Do you remember when
Yeah.
the huge amount of awareness being built about that? And there was a couple of cosmetic companies at the time who said, no, we don't use animal testing in any of our products. And then further investigation by journalists, by analysts, by animal rights groups found, no, you do. 3 steps down your supply chain in another country, you absolutely do use animals to test your products. And it was bringing that all to the fore. So yes, for those companies that were using animal products, it was a very uncomfortable time, but it gave consumers so much more transparency on what they wanted. And that was also largely driven by consumers saying, we want to do this. And I recall at the time it was driving government regulation as well, and saying, no, we won't be importing XYZ. And Body Shop is very established, obviously, but other companies in the UK, for example, are absolutely saying this. And there is a real echo here to what you're just saying, Nimreet, about that consumer pushing narrative, and also your point on the age. So I did want to bring up Gen Z now, I believe we're at. Yeah. trying to keep up all the age groups. We're Gen Z, and they're very powerful, especially leveraging social media and other online tools to get their message across. Melissa, have you found this in your business very much, the differences in your consumers when it comes to their age?
Yes and no. I think my strategy is really education, and that can be changing minds of anyone of any age. And, I think just in general, the word sustainable is a word that is problematic for anyone. And it's problematic, especially for the jewelry industry, because, we don't really know what it means, and it's overused and ambiguous. And I think there is something that is true about all of us, no matter what our age is, and that is that we do seek out information, but it's sometimes just really hard to understand between all of the, like the terms that are zooming around. And, I think there's also the reality a lot of us have to just be transparent about. For example, there is no perfection in any industry. And for gemstones and precious metals, which are, of course, they're extracted from the earth. There's no getting around that. And they are finite. There is only one garnet. There's only one gold nugget. So, just this as an example, these are in and of themselves not sustainable. But what is sustainable or can be sustainable are local economies, and especially the remote mining communities. And ideally, they're not just surviving, they're thriving. And I think that's why, for me, responsibly sourced is a better goal rather than something that's sustainable, because that's going beyond being ethical, conflict-free, traceable. It protects people, their skills, and the natural environment. And ideally, this happens through vertical integration. And by the way, it looks different from Australia to Kenya to Colombia. And, I think just being completely transparent about all of that stuff goes a really long way, especially in this world of, not really knowing what the terms mean. And I think just, owning what is really important. And also there's something important to just say, like, let's all start where we are. There is no perfect in any industry. And so there's always an opportunity to choose to do better. And I think that resonates with, a lot of consumers. It doesn't matter your age. But I do like how the younger generation is curious and eager to seek out those truths. And I guess the problem really is that it's just sometimes so hard to find what those truths are.
Exactly. There's so much ambiguity out there. And I'm really glad that you said about wanting to do better and just trying to do better with what we have right now. Because if we keep waiting for this perfect solution, the silver bullet, it simply doesn't exist. Nobody has all the answers. We really just need to crack on, exactly like you ladies are doing an incredible job of doing what we can while we can as well. What you mentioned there as well, Melissa, is you were saying about stopping the mining industry, that's not the solution. And we don't have time to dive into that, but that's a really, really interesting point, because it segues into a whole new world about how in some of these markets, the idea very much being, well, we'll just stop it. We'll just stop the impact. Because it's not, as you say, sustainable per se, it's more, responsibly sourced. But then the impact on the local job economy, the impact on the environment, so on. If you go to an ESG provider, those credentials will completely plummet because local employment is so poor, because you shut down the mine that was, so it's so intricate, it's so multifaceted, and trying to speak about it with straight lines is almost impossible. Everything's weaving in amongst each other, and that, I think this is something where the younger generations, because they're coming into it fresh-faced, essentially, this is what they're growing up with, they see those linkages a lot. And they're very keen to drive them forward as well. I mean, Nimreet, what was the reaction from your supply chain when you said, this is my idea, this is what I want to do? What was the level of momentum behind the supply chain? Did they understand? Did they want to, edit anything?
So when I was initially started, I did a Kickstarter. It was a crowdfunding campaign to collect funds to do my first production run. And when I was looking for my manufacturers, I think it took me longer than I expected, because it was hard to find the right people that were able to meet me where I was also wanting to have the same values. And also it's hard, at least in the fashion industry that I know, to be fully transparent for factories about their workers' right. Are they really fully using 100% like animal-free product, or the amount of water uses there is? And I wanted to know all those things, and I wanted it in a written document, a contract and stuff. So it definitely took me a lot longer. And usually the response I got that it would be a lot more cheaper if you opt out for the solution, because there's just so much resources around it, and it's a lot easier to get it. So I think there is people are not as open to it as much, and there have been it would have been a lot more faster, I would say, in terms of timeline, if I wanted to build something that was going the other route, that was the easier versus. But I think
just on that, Nimreet, there's that famous saying, which is go slow to go fast,
yes,
right?
Yes,
you
yes,
did all your
yes,
due diligence, you ticked all the boxes that you possibly could so that you were able to surge in the future.
Yes, and I think there's this new terms like total ethics fashion that is incorporating our environment, our animals, and our workers' right. So I knew that I wanted what I'm building to have all that, because I was starting a company during COVID, and we knew, everything that's happening and where we were. So it definitely took me longer, but I'm happy with the manufacturer we're working with. We're working with women-owned workshops, artisan workshops in Mexico, and then in India we work with nonprofits as well. and we are able to oversee everything. So we have that. I like that kind of able to control as well, because I want to know. And I also have family in India, so we can do random, audits and stuff.
Of course, of course, it's your business. You'd like as much
Yes,
control. It's your responsibility, so you definitely want to have all the control possible. But it's also that, again, it's that power of language, that power of the story. The ladies that you mentioned that you work in Mexico and India, and that was all part of the company's narrative, that broader narrative, its broader character, like we're talking about with the gemstones. And it's all these things can help strengthen that communication line to help with suppliers to get them more and more on board. I mean, as you're going on, do you find suppliers are now easier and the conversations are quicker because you are more established, Nimreet?
Yes, definitely. And I have now people reaching out to me if I want to work with them. So I see a lot of those emails now versus me in the beginning. I kept, no, I can't do this. So it's definitely better. And I get if you want to see social proof or you build up or now they don't want to invest in the time. But right now, I definitely see that. Recently, I also got certified and I've made this, my checklist is to work with organizations that are also certified. So that just eliminates all the due diligence in a way that you have to manually do. So we are PETA approved, and everyone I work with also tend to be PETA approved, as well as we're looking into also getting other certifications. So I think having certification and now been in the business, and now they can see, like, if they search Soneha, they're able to see, okay, there is a company. So it is a lot easier. And now I kind of factories and workshops reaching out to us if you want to work with them.
Excellent, excellent. So in terms of your consumers, what are you both doing? Melissa, we'll start with you if that's okay. What are you doing as a company to make it as easy as possible for consumers to use you? There's always that idea, isn't it? That how are the spotlights being put on the right things for consumers? They're busy, everybody's got so much on. What's being done to make their lives as easy as possible to do the right thing?
Well, I think for me, it's kind of just being visible. And I host gemstone education events with some local partners, one of which is this really great restaurant that I do wine and gemstone pairings with. And it's so fun to have a joyful experience. And we talk about low intervention wines and responsibly sourced gems. And so what's just so great about that is to be able to get into the hands the gems that I talk about, and like the positive impact that you can kind of literally see. And here's an example. This is a gem that probably can't really see it very well. This is so last week was the Ethical Gem Fair in Brooklyn. And so it was great to just hang out with, and this time last week, actually, all of the people in the responsible sourcing space coming together and talking about like what their latest and greatest is. And so, one of them, one of the organizations is called Virtue Gem. And so literally their gemstones have, they come from our, Central and East Africa. And so the gem I just showed you was from Kenya, and they have, each country has their own gemstone cut. And so that was the cheetah cut. And so you can really just tell that story that here's a gemstone. It's from artisanal miners, either women or their male allies. These are the people who are mining. And by the way, artisanal miners are doing this part-time. They're oftentimes farmers, and they're using farm tools to mine their gemstones when they're not, say, for example, doing harvests or something like this. So when you have a gemstone that really tells that story, and you can say, look, this gemstone, it was cut in country, and more of that revenue is staying in country. And by choosing these gemstones, and yes, you can learn about like, well, what is a tourmaline or what is a garnet, and like all those amazing things, you can really start to kind of connect on an emotional level and say, oh my gosh, I really would love to support, either one of the designers that I have on All the Brilliance who's pieces use gemstones from artisanal miners in East Africa, or if you want to purchase a piece that is like a special bespoke piece just for you, you can purchase a gem like that, and I could make it into earrings or a necklace or a bracelet. So, you know, your impact goes really far in a very short supply chain, if that makes sense. And to be able to get these kinds of things in the hands of people in a space that's joyful and fun, and they can just ask any question, and it's not intimidating, and you know, it's engaging, and it's just fun. So I think for me, that's really my strategy, is just to like be really open, and you know, there isn't a strange question to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. The education side of it is absolutely key. And you did mention that earlier as well, when you were in your introduction saying about gemstone education. I've got that underlined because we'll come back to that again. But it's such a common theme and such a powerful theme through everything to do with responsible sourcing, sustainability, a greener future, and so on. The more we know, the more we can try and do better. Nimreet, what about you? I mean, your story of how the business started and what inspired you to get going is detailed on your website. Obviously, we've chatted about it a bit as well. Would you mind just sharing a quick snip with the listeners? Because I think that's very powerful as well.
Absolutely. So I started the business when my cousin with Down syndrome was looking for shoes he could wear independently, and we couldn't find any that he could use. So he has low motor skills, and I thought about it was just a side project. I was like, okay, well, he can't find it, and I know how important it is for him to be independent in his daily tasks. So I decided to just build him. I mean, I worked with artisans, but designed it in a way where he loves using Velcro. It's really a lot easier for him. So I built him a shoe using cactus with the Velcro. So it's a lot easier. That was our first design. I launched it on Kickstarter as well. So it's absolutely his favorite. And when I started, I knew that I wanted to use something that was plant-based leather, which also comes under vegan leather, but it is made out of plants. So the one we're using is made out of cacti. Just since they launched on Kickstarter, and then I was able to kind of go from there. But when I started, it was a thing I did for my cousin, and from there it's been an exciting journey. And I did it because all the encouragement I got, because people like this shoe and they're like, oh my God, we'd love to wear something that's also cactus leather and more inclusive. And yes.
So do you think that's a key driver for you in terms of with customers and pushing them to make, not pushing, encouraging them to make sustainable choices? Do you think it's that inclusivity as well as the environmental aspect? It's a two-pronged, accidentally, I know, but is it a two-pronged strategy for you? And have you had examples of where that's really come through?
So yes, I think people want to see everything inclusive nowadays. And that's why when I was building the shoe, and then when I was trying to look into supply chain, workers are also paid, right? So I want to build that foundation everywhere. And I know that's also what consumers look for, because that's what I looked for when I was shopping. So I knew, okay, if I want to do this. I've also been a volunteer for United Nations for 7 years. I worked for them in Bay Area, California. So I was kind of already, I knew in a sense how much animal leather industry contributes to pollution and CO2. So I think that also educating them has also been what Melissa was saying, a big part of. So we try to do a lot of informational campaign. And I know for my audience, they like to see numbers and they want to see the impact in numbers. Really working on that. And then recently we did one where we've been working on that, really incentivize them, is that letting them know what one piece of, let's take the shoe, for example, what type of impact it would have versus if you buy a shoe that's animal leather. So the numbers we have is that if you buy one shoe that's based out of plant-based leather, it has around cactus leather, especially 3 kg of CO2 versus animal leather. One pair of shoes have 40 kg of CO2. And then also giving numbers.
That's 3 kg versus 40
40
kg.
40 kg for
versus
one
40
pair
kg.
of leather shoes. And then in terms of water usage, we use cactus. So cactus doesn't require water that much. So if you compare it to the amount of water that's used to make the leather, if you opt out for plant-based cactus leather, you save around 164,000% of water comparative to animal leather.
I mean, that's astonishing, isn't it? Nimreet, you've slightly, oh, you're back, you go first for a second, but that is astonishing when we are facing global crisis. It's not, you know, it's not widespread just yet, but it is a crisis that we're you know, heading towards very, very quickly, relatively speaking. Yes. And then you hear those sorts of numbers, and they sell themselves, really.
Yes, yes. So I think people, when they see that, they want. It's just everyone asks numbers. That's what I saw when I was starting in-person market, and like, well, can you numbers, or is there data to back up? And now that there has been a lot of more studies done by other organizations too on this, there's one Instagram account that's been really doing all these studies called Collective Fashion Justice as well. So I really encourage everyone to check them out. They do a lot of studies on ethical fashion, leather industry, as well as workers' right. But it definitely incentivizes people. And then also topping that, I've learned with a good offer that you can offer that mitigates people's risk when they're buying from you has been really, I think, kind of had a positive impact when people are buying and looking into transitioning into it.
And I think a flip side of all this education and this information sharing, which is so critical, is something that we've mentioned very, very briefly, is greenwashing, is that risk of greenwashing, because it is very prevalent in today's business environment. And for anybody who's not completely familiar with it, it's essentially when a person or a company makes people believe that they or their company are doing more to protect the environment than they really are. It's a bit of a, you know, hood over the eyes situation, and hoping to get away with it. I mean, this is a huge topic. We won't be able to dive into it all today. We could probably do 3 hours on this alone. But Melissa, what strategies or methods do you think businesses can use to give them the best chance of avoiding greenwashing? Because apart from being the wrong thing to do, the reputational damage is huge as well.
Yeah, I would say that my strategies and partnerships are really human ones, with or without blockchain. And I believe just, you know, really telling that story about, you know, this is the person, like the person has a name, and this is what this person looks like, and this is the environment that they're mining from. And I mean, honestly, it's so inspiring to know the kinds of stories that the miners endure. And, you know, they really care about creating a wonderful, thriving community, not just for themselves and their children. They really want to participate in, you know, a movement where, you know, access to having an open market, for example, for not just their country, but the countries around them. You know, they share information with each other, like, oh, have you tried this? Or, you know, it's you know, really quite something when you see the idea of, yes, there is blockchain, and there is, I think, from our Western gaze, this need and desire for data. And of course that's true, but when you think about where they're coming from, like, they don't know what a website is. You know, when Virtue Gems started their project during COVID to give access so that they were able to bring their gems to market, they didn't really understand, well, what is it for, this website? And, you know, imagine, you know, they're surprised when they're like, and what is you know, what is a spreadsheet? And so, you know, it was sort of, again, like a start where you are thing where, you know, at the beginning, blockchain was not possible, but through NGOs and grants, this was possible. And so now Anza Gems is another example. most of their pieces are on blockchain, but and Virtue and Anza are sort of like sister companies with slightly different models. But both of these companies are super transparent about this is the impact, and these are the people who are on the ground. These are the women who are mining, and maybe one group of women is sort of just doing surface mining, and so you can actually go and find out these stories of how they're really mining and bringing these gems out of the earth.
I think yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very much the case with smaller companies like you're speaking with. I've worked with smaller companies like that as well in Southern Africa, and the story base is there. And so the story base carries through enough that the concerns over greenwashing, until they reach maybe the distribution and the marketing, it's not so much the greenwashing for the individuals on the ground who are essentially doing a lot of the hard work. It's more as it becomes a business, as it starts factoring into a business model and a business structure. And then sometimes information can be misleading, and data can be exaggerated, or we've all seen data stats that you can look at 3 different ways, and you have to make an ethical choice as to how you choose to portray that information. The others aren't incorrect, they're still fact, but they're very misleading. So fact and misleading are, have their own trains as well. So I think that's, like you say, having those story bases is great when the company's small and it's such a human powered business. But then when it gets to the marketplace, or when it gets to people who are less scrupulous or less educated and not meaning to do these things, I think that can be where things go perhaps a little awry. Nimreet, have you seen any concerns about this, and not just with your business, but in general when it comes to greenwashing?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, especially in the fashion industry, with fast fashion, but big brands coming off, but we are sustainable. But then you're kind of, every day you're pushing this pieces of new clothing. I don't know how it can be that eco-friendly or sustainable. And then, but if you really kind of dive into the history of it, and then you see like, okay, no, but they're funding these things. It's just a whole mess. I think it's very hard for a consumer to really, and nobody has that time to kind of go into that in day to day. So they believe what's being told. I think one of the way consumers can, they can look for certain certifications where that work is done. So how we were talking about the makeup industry, like if you look for PETA approved, it's not tested on animal, rather than because the brand can say anything, but if they're still doing it. So I do think looking for certification from a consumer standpoint can be a good way to avoid those brands, and also to look for, I think for each individual, what I've learned, certain things matter more. To look into the values and intents you have. I think especially in the US, there are certification almost, I think, most of the industries. So you might be able to narrow it down that way, and look into brands and kind of filter them out to kind of be more aware and help those certifications make you the right decision.
It's also a tricky one, because I find this very much in the ESG market and some of the other certification spaces as well, that companies want to do this. They want to do the right thing. So they'll commission an ESG report, for example. They'll dive in and say, we want to do the best thing. Of course, their results are awful because it's their first time in their beginning. And so they think, oh gosh, we can't put that out because we need this report to be a positive document, because that will help us get investors, which will help fund the projects that we need to make our next report even better, our next and get to net zero. So we can't put out that report because the numbers are awful. Well, that's green hushing. I know green hushing, but you can't put out the report, and then you get locked into this cycle, and it's painful. It can be, the companies that even very well-meaning, they have to take a hit in the beginning, and just to be able to get that funding in, and then just the idea in 5 years, hopefully everybody's forgotten about that first project. And I think it's about changing the narrative of, you're still investing that time. Your employees have been assigned to support getting that report done. You're ahead of the game, because yes, maybe your report numbers aren't strong, but you've done it. You've paid for this document. It's not a small effort. And so to take pride and to stand tall with that, and then, you know, that will also help bring investors in. But it's very, very interesting in terms of the certification, and sort of almost getting on the wagon can sometimes, you know, you can fall and scrape your knee a little bit before you're fully on it. And Melissa, I wanted to ask you as well about technology, and you mentioned then about blockchain. We've spoken a lot about people who are in more developing countries and their access and understanding of technology versus how that the products essentially get to the Western market as well. From your point of view, are you able just to elaborate a little bit on how you've closed that gap in when it comes to technology and helping to educate on the ground so that the bigger idea of the business makes sense?
You know, I think it can be just as simple as being as transparent as possible and saying, you know, look, I work with these gem partners. In some cases, you know, they're certified, like Fairmine Gold, for example, is an assurance label that the gold you're buying is, you know, it's traceable. It is, you know, you can know that it comes from this region, from artisanal miners, and they did not use mercury and cyanide. I'm transparent about another one of my partners, Perpetuum Jewels, and they specialize in post-consumer recycled diamonds. I mentioned that earlier. So again, this is an organization that has a certification, and also what Jay does is he really builds in whatever information he can find from, if he buys, say he buys some jewelry from an estate sale, he does as much research as possible to find out, you know, what is the story behind that particular piece. And maybe these diamonds were harvested from this brooch, and basically just giving this gem a provenance so that when it re-enters the market, again, like this wonderful thing about the circular economy, right? Like it's really entering the market with a provenance in a space where, well, gosh, you know, who knows where this gem came from? You know, it just was, oh, well, found it belonged to someone before. What Jay's doing is really transforming that so that it's really starting that story and bringing it to the marketplace. So, you know, you can know, okay, well, maybe my concern is I want to make sure all of the, you know, if I'm buying again an engagement ring, I want to make sure that my diamond was not mine during conflict. So, you know, you can tell by the way gemstone was cut when it was cut. So, okay, maybe I want to just focus on Art Deco diamonds for my engagement ring because I can know that that is before conflict.
Brilliant. And unfortunately, we're going to just pop to audience questions. I say unfortunately because I have about 50 more questions for you both, and there's no stop to how many things I'd like to ask you. So, fortunately, are there any audience questions? If not, we'll dive back in. So we had some comments in the chat about, ladies, have you noticed how much damage to our earth from our $13 billion bottled water industry? That's a whole story in itself. That's certainly a good one to go with. While we wait for any questions, if they pop through, if our audience members want to be bold, and we will go to a quick rapid fire session, which I think we'll all enjoy. So as I mentioned, it's rapid fire. So it's a couple of word answers. It's quite tricky. Melissa, we'll go Melissa and Nimreet, if that's okay with you. Okay, here we go. So one word. Melissa, share the first thought that comes to mind when you hear the word sustainable fashion. Tick tock, tick.
Shop in my closet. That was more than one word, but
it's succinct. It's brilliant. Thank you. What about you, Nimreet?
Ethical.
Excellent. What's the most impactful sustainable product or practice you've adopted in your daily life, Melissa?
Choose to not purchase plastic as much as possible.
Yeah, again, that's another web conversation, another webinar. What about you, Nimreet?
I think using a reusing water bottle, like buying a reusable water bottle or like a coffee mug. Yeah.
Well, this was mentioning at the beginning about, you know, that's 14 trillion in terms of consumers in the US, and that almost all those products I mentioned contain plastic. And we didn't have time to go into it in the beginning, but when I was looking through the list, the plastic volumes are terrifying. So it's interesting that you both went with that as well. Which eco-friendly habit do you think consumers can adopt right now, in our spirit of start where you are, what they can adopt right now for the biggest positive impact, Melissa?
I'm going to steal my other answer, and that is shop your closet and also look in your jewelry box.
Yeah, very true. Nimreet?
Researching before buying, and also I would kind of say, Melissa, what she said. Do you really need to buy, or is it something you can kind of use from your closet? Or
absolutely. And give a single actionable tip for consumers to avoid single-use plastics.
Just say no.
Yes, yeah. Vote with your purchasing finger and just don't buy it, and eventually hopefully they'll get the point. How about you, Nimreet?
Yes,
Same?
I would say taking your bag to the grocery store. That could be keeping one in your car so you don't have to. Yeah.
And the last rapid fire question, in 5 seconds, name the best book or resource for someone looking to educate themselves on conscious consumerism.
Braiding Sweetgrass.
Braiding Sweetgrass.
I think that's the name of the book. Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier there's a Instagram account called Collective Fashion Justice. I just absolutely love their research and how they detail in every aspect of fashion. So I would definitely recommend checking them out.
Brilliant. Well, I think for now we have got a question. So what can we do about plastics? Oh, this is a really tough one. Great question. What can we do about plastics that come in our food without consumers' knowledge? So I assume that's not just with the packaging, but as we should all be terrified about the molecules within our food, what we're actually consuming within our bodies. So the question is, what can we do about that? How much research can we do, and how can we trust the source of information? And this is something that I think I have in my notes here for our conclusion, is almost the major red flag of this conversation, is making it as easy as possible for consumers, which means certifications, which means trusting certifications, which takes time, which we don't have. So it's very circuitous. Melissa, what do you think in response to that question? How much research can we do about plastics that come in on food without consumers' knowledge?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I guess it comes down to just, like that I asked earlier in another panel, I just asked like the idea of, why is it that we need to rinse off like a peanut butter jar? I feel like I now know the answer, which is so it doesn't maybe get tossed or doesn't get dropped out of a machine, especially with the Keurig pods. And I think it's just, as much as possible, being aware on, social media platforms. There are tips, as you said, Nimreet. I think we can learn a lot of little things just within our social communities. And I also am a part of Women in Climate, and I think that's an incredible organization. I just love every single woman who's involved. And we oftentimes share information about like, oh, did you know this? Or, I've participated in a lot of beach walks where, it's really fun to meet other women who are, they care about the same things. And, I think there's a lot of exchange when you find yourself in spaces, especially in person, and you just exchange ideas.
Absolutely. And we've got another question through. What is your biggest struggle so far as female business owners in the sustainability space? You've both set up businesses, both unique businesses with their own stories, their own character, and different challenges within the supply chain. But Nimreet, what would you say has been your biggest struggle? Maybe you've had no struggles, but if you were able to share your biggest struggle.
I think for me, my biggest struggle was since when I was trying to find a manufacturing partner. And I noticed that since I was looking in India, it's like fully male dominated industry. people had a hard time taking me seriously. So sometimes I would have to ask either my brother or my dad to sometime kind of accompany me in a meeting or something initially in the beginning. So that was kind of disheartening, but I think that I would definitely say that was the biggest struggle, because I think that just because they haven't seen women in that space, it was harder for them to fully be supportive of that.
And it's the case that you had a supportive family system that could aid you in that. But if for other individuals who are female and entrepreneurs and breaking into this space who may not have that, or who may be living in another country and not know one in the local community, what you did was already difficult and impressive enough, and then it adds another step in the ladder for them. So broadening that perspective, which we're trying to do with inclusivity, aren't we? As communities, we're trying to not judge perceptions based on someone's age or their height or whatever, all these things that we as humans immediately view and digest within about a millisecond when we meet each other. And we're trying to get past that, and that's the sort of thing that I really hope will feed through, so that the next generation of Nimreets won't have that problem.
Yeah.
That's the joy.
And I've also seen an increase in female-owned workshops in India as well. So kind of,
yeah, that's very meaningful. How about you, Melissa?
I would say one of the hardest things that I've been experiencing is finding packaging that I feel is honoring my ethos. It's just really impossible to, it's like you're always giving up one thing for another thing. And I guess that's the reality in all of the industry for all of us as entrepreneurs is, the challenge is having to choose, like, what right now do I have to sort of surrender until that next solution arrives. And I think the more we ask for things, and the more we share, like, have you found a solution to packaging? Have you, I think the more there is that opportunity for that solution to sort of come about and present itself.
Oh, excellent. But one more comment was about community. Having a support group around you as founders is absolutely key. Yes, entirely agree. We've got 3 minutes left, so I just want to round up on the key points made during the session, which I do feel that we could have, as a tributary from River, we could have had about 10 extra hours going down so many avenues. This is very, very interesting. And thank you to both of you for sharing and being so open as well. Power of the story, that shone through from both of you in the last 50 minutes, the power of the story in so many different ways, when it comes to helping get supply chains on board, when it comes to getting consumers to understand, in the power of the story when it comes to education, in the power of the story right back, like Melissa's mentioning, at the minds, right at the absolute start of that supply chain. It's so human-based, it's so heart-based. Can really get more heart-based, could you really? The power of Nimreet's story in terms of that, why the business was founded, all these things rotate around the power of the story, and that has shone through from both of you. Fact-based dialogue. Greenwashing is an issue when people intend to or not. It's a huge challenge. It discredits companies that are trying to do the best they can, and it slows progress towards net zero. And as we all know, we have no time as it is, let alone wasting time. So fact-based dialogue merged with the power of that story, and that need and desire for data. And the data that you shared, Nimreet, was so powerful, and I'm looking forward to seeing that online, especially that water stat. It's definitely making me rethink my shoes. That's what I thought when you said it. I thought, oh gosh, so it's so powerful. Making it as easy as possible for others. So making it as easy as possible for consumers to make the right choice. Making it as easy as possible for investors to go, oh, you're like Nimreet was talking a lot about certifications. Oh, you're certified in X, Y, Z. I feel comfortable. And you're saving me so much due diligence, which you were saying, Nimreet, really held you up at the beginning as well, having to win through all manufacturers and having to do all that checking and so on. If there was investors behind that having to be paid on bridge financing, for example, you can start turning into tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars because companies aren't certified. So it makes it as easy as possible for investors to support, for consumers to know what you're doing, pick up the product. Is the label there? Great, let's move forward. So as an example, when I buy makeup, I don't really look at the brand, as it were. I just look for the logo, and even now I couldn't tell you what brand I use. All I know is that the logo's there for the animals. That's, you know, and getting to that point with the certifications that we talked about would be extremely powerful. And I really felt those start where you are. We're not in a perfect situation. Melissa, you've mentioned that several times. Just start where you are, do what you can, and things will start to increase in momentum. And they already are in the fashion industry and the jewelry industry and in many others as well when it comes to positive consumption. Are there any other points that you'd like to add, ladies?
No, I feel you covered it really well.
Great summary. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone involved in putting together this summit. I mean, it's just so powerful to meet other women and hear how, you know, what we're creating together as a collective is inspiring. And thank you so much, Michelle, for you know, moderating. And yeah, I'm so grateful to have met you more meaningfully, Nimreet. So yeah, yay to community.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Nimreet, anything you'd like to say?
No, I just wanted to again also, yeah, thank everyone for organizing this and giving us the space to have this conversation. And you know, these type of conferences and informational sessions are definitely helpful, us leading that way to a future.
And I certainly echo that. And thank you, Nimreet and Melissa, just for being so open, for keeping up with me when my questions danced from here to there. And you never skipped a beat. You're completely open. And I really appreciated it. I really look forward to today's hour. I was really keen to see what you both had to say. And yeah, all it's done is lead to more questions, which can only be a great thing. So thank you very much, Melissa, Nimreet, and the team as well. We've hit our mark. We're at 5 o'clock. So hopefully see you all again soon.